Hi everyone, this is CY once again. Thanks for joining me today. Today's video is about my usage experience of DF64V after about a month, close to 2 months, and then of course compare it with a similar kind of grinder, which is actually the variable RPM G64. Both are 64 mm. The burrs are slightly different. I'm not going to talk so much about the taste of the coffee coming out from both uh, or something like that, but rather I'm going to tell you how I actually avoid um, certain things from happening, such as the jamming of the coffee beans that's inside the DF64V especially, and my way of overcoming that, right? I hope this video will help some of you out there, right? So stay tuned and let's get on to it. Right, so for those of you that have been following my channel, right, you know that I have reviewed this grinder, which is the G64 quite a while ago. Right, this is the finished product, and this is the new baby, which is the DF64V. I have been using this close to about 2 months, and this is the sort of similar of an auto temper that I use in my shop daily. And I'm going to use this espresso machine, which is a pressure profiling, flow profiling kind of weight measuring kind of machines, which allow me to control the pressure on the coat. Right. So, but the main character is these two, the comparison between these two, right? Right. So let's dive into my usage experience between these two, right? For the DF64V, right? Whatever RPM that you set at, if the beans is a little bit on the denser and light roasted side, I the chances of it jamming is pretty high. So, which means to say, there's a few ways we can overcome this. Number one is, of course, you have to turn on the grinder, right? Right now, my RPM is only at about 800, right, which is pretty low RPM. So I have to make sure that the burrs are actually spinning, right? Let me see, right, because it's so quiet that I couldn't actually tell whether the burrs inside is moving. So let me just throw a few beans inside, right? It's actually grinding, right? So, yep. So let's purge all the beans out, right? So I have experienced quite a little bit of the beans jamming the excuse me, jamming the burrs, and it's really frustrating because every time you have to wait for the grinder to reset, and then because the grinder will not immediately power on once the burrs is actually jammed together with the beans, so you have to wait for a while for the grinder to reset, and then it will come back on again. So that's a frustrating thing. And every time it jams the burrs, I have to take out everything and clean everything inside. So at the start, I find that this grinder is probably not my everyday go-to grinder because it's such a frustrate. I have so much frustration using this grinder. But after using for quite a while, I realized there's a way to get around it. Of course, number one is you have to on the grinder, right? And when you want to dose the coffee beans inside, make sure that you do not pour everything inside at one go, right? That's very important because if you pour everything at one go, at the lower RPM, it will cause too much beans to be fed inside the grinder, and especially if you are grinding on the finer side, the grinder will not be able to grind all the beans at one go. Hence, it will cause the jamming. So my suggestion is, for example, right now I'm actually grinding at a grind setting of 14, and I'm using reasonably medium roast coffee beans. This is beans from Mexico, right? So let's give it a try. Let's measure 18 grams of coffee. Right, 18.1 gram. So let's also zero this thing so that I know I can actually measure the output and the retention of this grinder. let's measure again. This is 18 grams. Let's tare this. Right, and you have to feed it slowly. So this is the way I do it. Do not pour everything at one go, but rather feed it slowly. Right, and everything should come out, as what it's supposed to be. Let me flick it. Right, I can hear that there's no more beans actually being grinded inside, and let's do a quick weigh of the beans. 17.8. So you can see that after I flick it, it actually retains about 0.2 grams of coffee. And now if I do a quick bellow, right, it gives me 17.9. So the retention on this grinder is about 0.1 gram if I bellow, and then if I flick this knocker here. So that is the kind of grinder. So even if, let's say, I tune down the RPM, so let's say now I tune down to 600 RPM, right? Let's test whether this thing will still jam, right? I'm going to make some coffee out of this later. Right, so same thing, let's measure. The problem with this grinder is in order for you to feed slowly, you have to use another cup to dose your coffee. Otherwise, you will not be able to catch it in time. So let me just get a picture. Right, so I'm going to measure again 18 grams of coffee. So let me power off the grinder first. Right, 18.1 gram. So similarly, let me put my dosing cup below. This is actually from the G64. Right, let's power on the grinder. Now I'm actually grinding at RPM of 600, and let's see whether the slow feeding actually will cause the jamming of the burrs or not. Right, so same thing, let's hear the sound until there's no more beans being grinded inside the burrs. Right, and let's do a flick. Right, and let's pump it. Okay, I think I didn't use this to offset. Okay, so let me pour the coffee bean inside here, and then I'll be able to tell what is the retention on the grinder. Right, 17.9. Again, there's a 0.1 gram per retention. So I can safely say that this grinder, with all the bellowing and the flicking of the exit chute, it retains about 0.1 gram of coffee. So as you can see, if you slow feed the coffee, and it will never jam the burst set. So that's one way to get around it. Of course, the purpose of getting a zero RPM grinder is for you to grind the beans slowly. So there's no point as compared to my DF64, you can't really pour the beans inside, expect everything to grind out all together because of the weaker motor. The torque of this motor is a lot weaker as compared to the DF64. So how about the G64, right? G64 is different, right? G64, I don't have to slow feed the grinder, right? Even if I reduce the RPM to, let's say, 1, right? And let's do a test. So right now, I will switch on the grinder. Okay, I will do two versions. The first version is I will grind the beans without turning the grinder on. That means I will turn the grinder will be currently off. I will dose 18 grams and then I'll pour the beans inside while the burr side is not moving. Right. So let me measure 18 grams of coffee first. Right, okay, 18 grams. So 18 grams exactly. So now the grinder is off. So I'll pour it in first. You can see there's no sound, and then I'll turn on the grinder. So of course, if you grind at lower RPM, you are expecting the grinding speed to be much slower, right? Okay, let's don't do bellow first. Let's turn off the grinder and let's do a quick measurement. Right, again, I have to switch it out because I'm using this as my cup. Right, it's 18.3. Probably there's some retention in the grinder before. So it actually retains, so the first one is actually not accurate because I didn't actually bellow out the grinder before I do the testing. So let me just do a quick, I can see there's a little bit of retention in the grinder. It actually comes with a bellow, but I find that the bellow is a bit ugly. So you can see that I don't install the bellow on this grinder. Right, so let's test it again, right? Okay, let's measure another 18 grams. Okay, that's 17.9 grams. Right, it's okay. So again, I'm just going to pour in. You can see the grinder is now off position. Initially, the grinder will struggle a little bit, but then it will continue to grind without any issue. So this grinder does not have any jamming issue, right? I so far I've so far not encountered any incident whereby the burst will jam on the G64. Right, let's turn off the grinder and let's go away. Right, it's 17.8 grams. So without bellow, you can see that it retains about 0.1 grams of coffee. So if I install this back and switch on the grinder and I bellow it, right, and that's 70.9. So it is equally, it's almost similar. Both grinders retain about 0.1 grams of coffee, right? Which is pretty awesome for a single dose grinder, right? So the main difference between the DF64V and the G64 is, of course, the build. The G64 is a lot heavier and it looks very similar to the Lagom P64. And the finishing on both, I would say, the finishing on the G64 is better. It's slightly better than the DF64V. In a way, I find that because of the small build of the DF64V, it is a bit flimsy. And of course, I've complained in my previous video, right? The barrel is simply too light and it always drop out when I use it. So usually I don't use this at all. I just bellow here, right? Same thing when I use on the G64. So on the whole, I like the G64 better than the DF64V. But if you use it right, both grinder actually produce very consistent result in terms of espresso extractions. So now let's move on to the last part of today's video. Let's make some coffee, right? All right, let's make the first cup of coffee from the DF64V, right, which is grind setting is at 15. And on my G64, my current grind setting is at 6.5. Right, of course, it doesn't make sense to you what is the grind setting at the moment because the beans is different, and both grinders are slightly different in terms of the grinding range, right? So let's pull the first shot on the grinder, on the coffee bean grinded by the DF64V. Right, this is 18 grams of coffee. I should have used a dosing cup earlier. And because I dose it into the dosing cup, so it's going to have a little bit of clump. So a WDT is going to help. So usually after I WDT, I will knock it on the table gently to settle all the ground, and I will not distribute it again. I will just temp it directly with my auto temper, which is now calibrated to 15, I believe it's 15 kg. Right, so let's just temp. Right, temp beautifully. Right, so let's now extract some espresso. Let's go to the manual mode. I'm going to stop at 2 bars of pressure. And then after 6 seconds, I'll ramp it up to 6 bar. Maybe it's too fine. Okay, espresso is coming out, and I'm going to go 9 bar. Beautiful espresso. Right, so about 30 seconds, about 40 grams of coffee. Right, it's almost the perfect ratio. And look at the espresso. Right, it's beautiful. Right, basically this is from the DF64V. Right, besides the earlier jamming of the burst, it's actually pretty good grinder. Right, so if you use it correctly, you should have no issue. So now let's move on to putting another shot for the beans grinder on the G64. Right, of course, another good thing about the G64 is it actually comes with a 50 mm dosing cup. Even though this is a bit, I would say, it's a bit too heavy and too bulky or too chunky, but it is still better than the non-standard dosing cup from the DF64V. So let's transfer the coffee over. Right, you can see if I do it direct transfer without pouring, right, the coffee tends to be a little bit better distributed. But nonetheless, I'm still going to do a little bit of WDT. Start with the bottom, slowly move to the middle, and then move to the top. That's all. And then do a gentle knock. Right, and then temp it straight away. Right, perfect temp every time. And then now let's move on to pulling of another shot espresso. Right, similarly, I'm going to start at 2 bar. After 6 seconds, ramp it up to 6 bar. Good. To 9 bar all the way. Right, I think the grinding size of the G64 is a little bit too coarse. So you can see in 22 seconds, I'm actually getting 51 to 52 grams of liquid. So this is definitely too fast. And you can see from the extraction, the color difference between the two, right? So this is a well extracted espresso, and this is running too fast, right? So basically, I'm not going to drink this one because I'm quite sure this will taste quite bad. Anyway, let's just try that, get a taste. Right, so the first one is from the DF64V. Of course, this is quite well calibrated. Wow, it's very balanced, and it's on the slightly brighter side, but the sweetness is there, the body is there. I think the DLC bar is pretty good in terms of giving me a good body and texture kind of espresso. It is very enjoyable, right? Okay, let's move on to the second one, which is from the G64. This is running too fast, as I mentioned just now. So Right, cheers. Hmm? Oh, oh, surprising. This is actually tastes actually pretty good, right? So even though the extraction is slightly on the faster side, there's a less body. The brightness has slightly lowered, but the sweetness has increased, right? So this is something really interesting. Really unexpected. So this is actually another very good espresso. So both espresso turn out to be quite delicious, right? So thank you for joining me today. This is UI once again. I hope you like what we do for our channel. And of course, if you're in the area of Seah Street, do drop by our cafe. Our cafe name is ASK Coffee Roastery, right? Hope to see you soon. And thank you for watching. Do remember to like and share our videos. And if you have not subscribed to our channels, do remember to hit the subscribe buttons. And I'll see you very soon in the next video. Thank you for joining me.